Callum Carrington slammed the door of his black Bentley with a curse under his breath, his Rolex flashing beneath the sleeve of his navy suit as he glanced at the time 47 minutes late. The board meeting was supposed to have started at 9 sharp. He hated being late. He hated chaos. But this morning had been a mess of last-minute investor updates and a call from Tokyo that ran over. Still, he was CEO of Carrington Global for a reason he could handle pressure. What he didn't expect was the silence that greeted him when he stepped into the sleek glass-paneled conference room on the top floor. Everyone was gone, except her. She sat at the head of the table, legs crossed, a silver laptop open in front of her, a half-empty coffee cup by her side. She looked up and Callum froze. She didn't flinch or stand. She just raised a brow and said, "You're late." His jaw tightened. "You're not on the board." "No," she said, closing the laptop slowly. "I'm the consultant your COO begged to stay after the rest of the room cleared out. Apparently, you were supposed to hear my presentation personally." He didn't recognize her, and he remembered faces. She stood then, smoothing out the knee-length black skirt she wore, the white blouse tucked in sharply, her dark curls pulled into a high ponytail. She was confident. Not overly polished like the typical corporate types he dealt with, but sharp, grounded. "And you are," he asked, walking to the table, "Blair Prescott, organizational strategist. Hired for 3 weeks to analyze your leadership bottlenecks and recommend structural improvements to your executive pathways." He blinked. "That sounds like consultant speak for I tell powerful people what they're doing wrong," she smiled. "Exactly." He liked her instantly. Not in the usual dismissive way he found most people tolerable. This was different. Her confidence wasn't performative. It was real, earned. "Sit," she said, motioning to the chair across from her. "You missed the first part, so I'll make it simple." He sat, more intrigued than annoyed now. "You've got a brilliant company," she began, clicking a button on her laptop that projected a slide on the wall. "But your department heads are afraid of you." Callum raised a brow. "Afraid? They're smart, but they overthink because they don't know how to read you. And when people don't know what someone wants, they freeze. That's your bottleneck." He leaned back in the chair, his gaze fixed on her. "You think I'm the problem? I think your silence is." She clicked to the next slide, showing anonymous feedback quotes. He recognized the patterns immediately. And damn it, she wasn't wrong. For the next 20 minutes, Blair walked him through team dynamics, trust gaps, and communication breakdowns. She wasn't lecturing, she was challenging him. And he liked it. When she finished, she closed the laptop and looked at him. "And that's why I suggested your board postpone the vote on the restructuring plan. You need to fix this first." Callum stared at her. "You convinced them to delay a vote I've been working on for 6 months." She didn't blink. "I didn't convince them. Your CFO did." After listening to me, he laughed. Actually laughed. It felt strange after a morning of tension and irritation. "You've got guts," he said. She tilted her head. "I've got data." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. Blair stood too, gathering her things. "Are you done here?" he asked. "My part's over," she said. "Unless you want more." He turned, eyes narrowing slightly. Meaning, I'm flying back to San Francisco tomorrow morning. But if you'd like me to stay and work with your executive team directly for the next 2 weeks, I'd consider extending." There it was. A choice. He didn't usually make decisions like this on impulse, but something about her presence, her clarity, the way she didn't try to impress him stuck. "Stay," he said. "I'll double your rate." She gave the smallest smile. "I didn't offer because of the money." "I didn't say that's why I'm offering." They stood there a beat too long. She grabbed her laptop bag and nodded once. "I'll have the new contract sent up. I'll be in your staff meeting tomorrow, 9 sharp." As she walked past him, her shoulder brushed his. She didn't apologize. Callum turned back to the skyline, heart beating faster than it should have. He wasn't sure what just happened, but it didn't feel like business anymore, not even close. Blair leaned against the elevator wall once the doors closed, heart racing. She told herself it was just adrenaline presenting to a high-powered CEO always came with nerves. But that wasn't it. There was something about him. The way he looked at her, not like a consultant, but like someone who had his full attention, which made no sense. He was a billionaire CEO. She was just a contract consultant who barely made it through her last breakup without swearing off men entirely. Still, something buzzed beneath the surface. And she didn't know what scared her more, that she felt it too, or that she didn't want it to stop. Blair pressed a hand to her temple as she flipped through the printouts on the hotel desk. Pages of charts, executive bios, and internal feedback reports were scattered across the surface, but her mind wasn't on the data. It was still back in that glass-walled conference room, replaying the way Callum Carrington had looked at her, not with doubt or dismissal, but with unexpected interest. She snapped the folder shut. This wasn't about him. It couldn't be. She was here for work, not whatever that tension had been. She'd dealt with enough complicated men in the past to know where that road led. She hadn't spent years rebuilding her independence, just to let it unravel because one powerful man looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. Still, when she walked into the staff meeting the next morning, this time held in a smaller, more intimate room with only a handful of executives, her pulse kicked up the moment she saw him at the head of the table. He was already speaking, voice low and clipped, as he reviewed quarterly projections. He didn't acknowledge her arrival, but she noticed the way his fingers paused briefly on the edge of the tablet he held. A single glance, no more than a second, flickered in her direction before he continued. No smile, no nod, just awareness. She took the empty seat beside the VP of Operations, keeping her posture relaxed but alert. Let him lead. She was here to observe. The meeting rolled forward with sharp questions and tense updates. Callum listened more than he spoke, jotting notes in a leather-bound planner that looked hand-stitched. His focus never wavered. But when Blair finally raised her voice to point out a pattern in the logistics bottlenecks, he looked up sharply. "You're saying the issue isn't volume," he said. "It's timing." Blair met his eyes. "Your suppliers aren't the problem. Your internal approvals are. You're adding 2 extra days to every cycle because managers are waiting for sign-offs that could be automated." The VP beside her stiffened slightly, but Callum's gaze didn't move. "Fix it," he said to the logistics director. "Rework the process. If you need help, use her." After the meeting, the team filtered out, murmuring among themselves. Blair gathered her notes, prepared to leave without comment, but Callum's voice stopped her. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved through the corridor, past polished glass walls and bustling assistants. She matched his pace easily, refusing to trail a step behind. "I want to ask you something," he said once they turned down a quieter hallway. "Should I be worried?" He didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something like amusement in his eyes. "Why'd you really offer to extend your contract?" She didn't hesitate. "Because you're running a company that could be exceptional, but you're standing in your own way." "I don't like wasted potential." "Is that your thing, saving lost causes?" "I don't waste time where I'm not needed." They reached the end of the hall where a heavy door opened into a private office, not his main one, she realized, but a second, more secluded space. A large desk stood beneath a window facing the Hudson, shelves lined with hardcover books and framed photographs. He motioned her inside, then closed the door. "That's not the only reason, though," he said. Blair crossed her arms. "You think I'm playing some angle? I think you don't rattle easy, and most people, especially ones who get paid to observe, tend to avoid friction. You lean into it." She tilted her head. "And you think that means I have an ulterior motive?" "I think it means you're not here just for the paycheck." Blair stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I'm here because I like building things that last. You want to know what impressed me, not your office, not your title. It was the way you actually listened yesterday. Most men in your position wouldn't." He studied her face. "That's rare enough to notice." Silence stretched between them. The air charged, the city humming softly beyond the window. Callum turned and walked to the desk, opening a drawer. He pulled out a small black box and set it on the edge. "What's that?" she asked. "An invitation," he said. There's a charity event tonight. My assistant RSVP'd on my behalf, but I don't do well at those things alone. Let me guess, Blair said. You want me to tag along and distract people from asking why the CEO looks like he'd rather be anywhere else? He looked up. No, I want you there because you're the only person in this building who doesn't care that I'm CEO. She hesitated. You know this isn't in my contract. Neither is saving my company, he said. But you're doing that anyway. Blair picked up the box and opened it. Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet, no tags, no branding, just understated elegance. She didn't ask how he knew her wrist size. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction. What time? 7. I'll have a car pick you up. She closed the box slowly. I'll be ready. As she walked out, her fingers brushed the edge of the bracelet case in her pocket. She didn't know what game he was playing, and she wasn't sure why she was letting herself be pulled into it, but one thing was certain. Callum Carrington wasn't just dangerous because of his money or power. He was dangerous because he saw her. And worse, he made her want to be seen. The car that arrived at Blair's hotel was a vintage Rolls-Royce, black with deep crimson leather interiors and a driver in a tailored suit who addressed her by name with quiet formality. She didn't say much during the ride, though her mind was anything but still. She'd attended formal events before conferences, galas, even a private dinner with a senator once, but this felt different. This wasn't networking. This was being deliberately chosen to stand beside a man who played chess on a corporate level and rarely let anyone close enough to touch the board. When she stepped out at the venue, a towering marble-pillared museum closed off for the evening's charity auction, the camera flashes didn't pause to consider who she was. They went off anyway, assuming anyone stepping out of that car had to be someone worth photographing. She barely had time to take in the grandeur of the candlelit foyer before Callum appeared at the top of the staircase. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo with a silk shawl collar and an expression that didn't soften until he saw her. You clean up well, she said as she ascended the steps. His eyes swept over her dress, a deep garnet satin that hugged her figure without being showy. You'll outshine everyone here. Good, she replied. Then maybe they'll stop looking at you like you're a zoo exhibit. He offered his arm. She took it. Inside the main hall, strings of crystal lights hung from the high vaulted ceiling. Waiters circled with champagne flutes and trays of amuse-bouches. Callum's presence commanded attention, but Blair noticed how quickly his jaw tensed when guests began approaching, all with the same eager glint of transactional conversation. Before yet another board member's wife could corner him about a private school fundraiser, he leaned in toward Blair's ear. You're my excuse to avoid all this. Don't abandon me. Sounds like a fair trade, she whispered back. I get to drink champagne and you get plausible deniability. They drifted through the room together, and Blair found herself watching him more than the art on display. He was different here, composed, but slightly removed. He shook hands, smiled politely, but his eyes always returned to her as if she anchored him. Have you always hated these things? She asked once they stepped onto a quieter balcony lined with lanterns. Since I was old enough to wear cufflinks, he said. My father used to drag me to them, said appearances were half the battle. And the other half, control. Blair leaned on the railing. You don't strike me as someone who needs to fight for it. I don't, he said quietly. But I do have to protect it. She turned toward him. From what? He hesitated, then stepped closer. From being used, from being twisted into something I didn't agree to. The words hung between them like smoke, curling with meaning. Blair didn't push, she just nodded. That's fair. They returned inside just as the auction began. Callum led her to a private table near the front, where a silver card bore his name. The auctioneer's voice filled the room as he introduced pieces of art, rare wines, and exclusive experiences. When a private island weekend came onto the block, Blair raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, you already own one. I don't, he said, eyes on the stage, but I've been offered 5 in the last year. Tempted, he turned his head slightly. Not unless I had a reason. Before she could respond, the auctioneer announced the final item, a one-of-a-kind piano, handcrafted in Austria. The bidding started high and climbed quickly. Callum surprised her by raising his paddle. "Seriously," she whispered. "I used to play," he said, watching the bidding continue. She leaned closer. "For real, until I was 17. Then my father found out I was skipping business seminars to take lessons. He sold the piano the next day." Blair's gaze softened, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Callum won the bid. As applause filled the room, he turned to her. "It's for my sister. She still plays. I figured it's time to bring one back into the family." She smiled, but it wasn't for the gesture. It was for the man behind it. Later, when they returned to the car, the city's lights glittered against the windows like scattered stars. Callum sat beside her in silence for a minute before finally speaking. "I don't usually explain myself." "I didn't ask you to," she said, looking out at the skyline. "You didn't have to." "That's the difference." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a slim envelope, pressing it into her hand. "What is it?" "A contract. Not for consulting," he said. "For something else. A project I've been developing. It's bigger than Carrington Global. And I want someone I trust to oversee it." She stared at the envelope, then back at him. "Why me?" His voice was calm, but there was something raw beneath it. "Because you see through the noise, and because you don't want anything from me, except the truth." Blair didn't open the envelope. "Not yet." Instead, she said softly, "What kind of project?" His eyes didn't waver. "The kind that changes everything." As the car rolled on through the night, she held the envelope in her lap, her thoughts racing faster than the city outside. Something had shifted between them. Something irreversible. And for once, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Blair stepped into the Carrington Global lobby the next morning, the envelope still unopened in her leather tote. The air felt heavier than usual, the low buzz of voices and elevator chimes doing little to distract her from the low thrum of anticipation in her chest. She knew what Callum was asking, even if he hadn't said it outright. He wasn't offering her a position, he was offering her trust. Control over something that clearly mattered deeply to him, and in his world, trust wasn't extended lightly. "Miss Prescott," the receptionist called softly. "Mr. Carrington asked me to bring you up to the executive floor. He's in his private suite." Blair gave a short nod and followed without hesitation. The elevator doors opened to a quieter, more refined space, dark wood floors, custom art, and tall glass doors at the end of a marble corridor. She found him standing by a long table set for two, the skyline behind him streaked with the lavender light of an early dawn. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and for the first time, he looked less like a CEO and more like a man who hadn't slept. "You're early," he said. "I didn't sleep much." He pulled out a chair for her. "Neither did I," she sat, setting her bag down. "So what is it, the project?" Callum poured coffee into 2 porcelain cups before answering. 7 years ago, I bought a failing tech firm. On paper, it didn't make sense. They were hemorrhaging money and had no leadership. But the founder had started developing a platform that could change how small businesses access funding. No predatory terms, no convoluted clauses, just clean capital. I kept it quiet while I stabilized it, rebuilt the team, found the right CTO. Now it's ready. What does it need from me? I've seen what you do with structure and people. This company is small but scaling. The team can't afford to make the mistakes my executives make. I want you to be their interim COO. Set the culture right before the market sees them. She leaned back, studying him. You're handing me the reins to something you've guarded in the dark for years. Why now? His voice dropped. Because I've spent most of my life building walls, and you walk straight through them. Blair's pulse jumped, but she kept her tone even. That's not a reason to jeopardize your legacy. It's not jeopardy, he said. It's the first real investment I've made in something that matters. You said you don't waste time where you're not needed. I need you here, she exhaled slowly. Then I'll do it, but only if I get full autonomy. You will. And I want a clause that lets me walk away if you interfere." His mouth curved, not in amusement, but in something closer to respect. "Done." She reached into her tote and slid the envelope back across the table, unopened. "You can draft a new one." He gave a short nod, then stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "You're not what I expected." "You were late to the meeting," she said. "You didn't get to expect anything." That made him turn. "I was late because I was on a call with the Tokyo team, but if I'd known what I was walking into." She raised a brow. "What, you would have come earlier?" "No," he said. "I would have cleared the rest of my day." There was a beat of silence before Blair stood. "We should get started. I'll need full access to the team, and I want to meet the CTO by noon." He stepped toward her, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. "There's one other thing. I'm not interested in being anyone's distraction," she said before he could speak. He didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to be." She nodded once, then walked past him, heels sharp against the polished floor. By noon, she was standing in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, shaking hands with a bright-eyed engineer who'd built the core of the funding platform from scratch. The team was lean, hungry, and surprisingly open to her presence. She spent the next few hours mapping out workflows, identifying gaps, and mediating a brewing conflict between two developers who hadn't spoken in weeks. By the time she returned to the Manhattan office that evening, her throat was dry and her mind buzzing. She didn't stop by Callum's floor. She didn't need to. He called her later that night. "You didn't say goodbye," he said. "I didn't realize we were doing that." He was quiet for a moment. "You impressed them." "They impressed me. I'm flying to London in the morning for 2 days. I can handle things here." "I know." She waited, sensing there was more. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "This isn't a game. I don't offer things I don't mean. And I don't pursue people unless I'm serious." Blair sat on the edge of her bed, her hand tightening around the phone. "Then I'll be clear too. I care about the work, but I don't chase anyone, not even you." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "But when I get back, I will ask you to dinner. Not a gala, not a rooftop, just dinner. You can say no." "I won't," she said quietly. "But I might make you wait." When he returned, she didn't make him wait long. They didn't go somewhere extravagant. They sat at a small Italian restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of Tribeca, with soft music and flickering candles. There was no need for pretense. They talked about their childhoods, about the people they'd lost, about the things they'd built to survive. By dessert, he reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I've built empires," he said. "But this is the only thing I haven't wanted to control." Blair's eyes burned, but she held his gaze. "That's good, because I wouldn't let you," he laughed then. A real, unguarded laugh. "I know." Weeks passed. The startup flourished under her leadership. The team stabilized, investors lined up, and through it all, Callum remained present but never overbearing. He let her lead. He let her build. And when he finally asked her to move in with him, not in some penthouse suite, but in the brownstone he'd quietly renovated in the West Village, she said yes, without hesitation. He proposed 6 months later in the same room where they first met, the conference table cleared, the lights dimmed, and a single ring box resting where her laptop once sat. "I was late the first time," he said as he knelt before her, "but I'm not making that mistake again." She didn't cry. She didn't stammer. She simply said, "Then don't ever be late again." He never was. The chapel was quiet, tucked behind a wrought iron gate on a cobblestone street in Florence, hidden just far enough from the tourist paths that only locals seemed to know it existed. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting slanted beams of light across the ancient stone floors. Blair stood near the altar, her heels echoing softly with each step. Her dress wasn't extravagant, but it was hers. Ivory silk, cut simply with a high neckline and a delicate row of buttons down the back. No veil. No fuss. Only a slim gold band already on her finger, a quiet promise exchanged in a courthouse weeks ago. Callum was adjusting the cuffs of his dove gray suit jacket when she turned. He looked up, and for a moment neither of them moved. "This is too quiet for you, isn't it?" she asked. "I wanted quiet," he said. "I wanted you." They hadn't planned a ceremony, not at first. But after months of building something neither of them had expected equal parts trust, fire, and stubbornness, they needed something that felt like a pause. A moment to breathe, to say it out loud. The priest cleared his throat gently from behind them. "You're not late," he said with a small smile. "But you're not early either," Blair laughed lightly. "We'll take that as a win." There were no guests, just them. They'd sent handwritten notes instead of invitations, thank yous to everyone who had helped, supported, or simply witnessed their journey. Her mother had cried when she received hers. His sister had sent back a pressed flower and a note that said, "He smiles more now." Blair and Callum stood side by side as the priest began to speak in Italian, his voice soft and measured. They didn't need to understand every word. They understood the meaning. When he asked them if they would stand together through the storms and the quiet, they answered without hesitation. Afterward, they stepped into the courtyard, where lemon trees cast shifting shadows on the ground. A table for two had been laid out beneath a canopy of ivy. No music. No photographers, just a bottle of wine, a plate of olives, and a small cake with their initials carved into white icing. Callum poured them each a glass and held his toward her. "To the woman who taught me that not everything has to be controlled," he said. Blair clinked her glass against his. "And to the man who finally stopped trying to do everything alone." He watched her for a moment, the corners of his eyes creasing. "You changed everything?" "I didn't change you," she said. "I just gave you space. I didn't know how much I needed that." She reached for a slice of cake, but he caught her hand and pulled her gently into his lap instead. She didn't protest. Her legs draped easily across his, her fingers resting against his chest. "You know what I was thinking about during the vows?" he asked. "What? The first meeting. You didn't even flinch when I walked in late. I was trying to decide if you were worth staying another day for." He kissed her shoulder just above the curve of her collarbone. "You stayed for a lot more than a day," she nodded. "And I'll stay for all the rest." Later that evening, they walked through the city holding hands as the sky turned shades of coral and gold. They wandered down narrow alleys, past open windows spilling laughter and music into the air. No one paid them any attention, and Blair loved it. They were just another couple in love, with no titles, no deals, no pressure. They paused on a bridge overlooking the Arno River. The water reflected the last of the daylight, shimmering like brushed metal. Callum leaned on the stone railing, his gaze on the horizon. "I used to think legacy meant building something no one could tear down. And now I think it's about who you build it with." She slipped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "Then I hope ours includes a little less boardroom and a little more breakfast in bed," he laughed, the sound low and real. "You'll get both. I already bought a place here, just a small villa. With a kitchen big enough for you to burn toast in." "I don't burn toast, you do? I just like it extra crisp." They stayed there until the sky turned indigo and the first stars blinked into view. Then they walked home, their home. Not the penthouse in Manhattan, not the brownstone in the village, though they still visited both, but a warm, sun-drenched place with old shutters and uneven floors, where Blair's shoes often ended up under the dining table, and Callum's cufflinks were always in the kitchen drawer for no reason at all. They worked together, still not always, not constantly, but enough to remember what brought them together. When they disagreed, which happened often, they met each other halfway. They didn't need grand declarations anymore. They had daily ones. The coffee Callum brewed before she woke. The notes Blair left on his desk reminding him to eat. The way he always kissed her forehead before a meeting. The way she always waited up when he worked late. They built a life filled with contradictions and compromise, with laughter, with quiet. With the kind of love that didn't need to be proven, it just was strong, steady, real, and it belonged to both of them. Forever.